Welcome to Licensed Poetics, a podcast where aspiring writers talk about books. I'm your host, Fang Ling.
And I'm Derek Dow.
And welcome to a new episode. And today is going to be a bit more casual episode because we have done a lot of book club episodes recently. So we're just switching it up a bit. What time is it for you, Derek?
It is. When I woke up, it was 5, but now it's 8.
For me, it's nearly 12 midnight. But I
I'm
slept in this morning, so
Nice. That's good. I'm planning on going straight to bed after this.
For any listener watching the clips, by the way, if you would like to watch clips of this episode, please follow us on Instagram. But if you're watching the clips, you'll see Derek's eye bags.
Yeah, it's not very flattering. I mean, I'm not usually the flattering, like, it's not usually flattering on this anyway, but
No, it's mostly the lighting, the eye bags, the look of an aspiring writer. Oh my God.
Who hasn't done any writing? Have you been writing recently? This is just good job.
I am so excited to report on that. Okay, so I've been really getting into project management.
You're project managing yourself, though, you mean?
Yes. Oh man, this is
Do you have
more
timelines?
casual.
Do you have like timelines and
Yes.
schedules? Are you hiring subcontractors?
This is really a more relaxed episode because can you imagine normal me going into this?
It's good to have some of these.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to have a balance. So I've been project managing myself and also LP really. I have created a very impressive shared calendar between the LP team, which now has 3 whole people. I mean, not full-time or paid, but so other than the very impressive management stuff I've done for Licensed Poetics, I also like try to schedule hours of writing during my week. So I'll try to do I'll aim for like maybe 3 hours on Saturday at any time during the day, but as long as I get that 3 hours of writing done, and also maybe 3 hours on 1 or 2 days during the week. And if I let a day go by without doing the 3 hours, I'll be like, okay, now that's 3 hours owing and I'll have to make up in the future.
Oh my God, you're like punishing yourself with more
I
writing.
know. It's not working super well so far, I'll be honest. Like,
Your skills as a project manager are outshining your skills.
as a writer.
Wait, no, that's a failure of project management. If you're punishing yourself for
Wait, isn't that the fault of me as a writer, as in like not getting up from the couch and actually doing the writing?
or you could say that you, the writer, are suffering from too strict a schedule imposed by you, the project manager.
Oh my God, yeah. I really should blame myself for this instead of me blaming myself.
That's gonna be a clip. That was good. That's so dumb. Oh, I should really blame myself instead of blaming myself. All right.
Anyway, so I like, even though it's only been like 1 week, I already have like 9 hours.
How many days are you supposed to? How many hours have you allocated?
I have 6 hours owing. Because I did no writing during the week, but I did very good 3 hours of writing today. So I filled my quota today. I just have the 6 week.
6 hours.
Yeah, the 6 hours. From
I was like, because if you started this like a week ago and you've already accumulated 9 hours, it just means you didn't write.
I know, right? He's worked out the math. But yeah, I don't know if you saw in the group chat, but we have a very wholesome writing group chat where I was like, I'm taking a new approach for my novel.
Oh yeah.
A different form. And that motivated me to like just pump out an entire chapter. It was about 1,600 words today before dinner. I did that. And yeah, I'm very proud of myself.
Nice. That's pretty good.
Yeah. But now I'm just worried that it's too much like The Catcher in the Rye. It's like exactly like The Catcher in the Rye now.
What is it that people say? Your debut novel is either a rip-off of something you love, or or about how much you resent God or your relationship with your father. Like that's like a whole thing.
Well, I'm glad that I'm trying very hard to resist both of those. Oh man. So what's it gonna be for you, huh? Your dad listens to this.
It's
Careful
probably
what
a
you
rip
say.
off. It's probably a rip off, to be honest.
Okay. You know,
My anger at God is, I think, fairly well documented. But I'm gonna try and avoid that whole thing about God and the father figure.
well,
I'm
you
just
can
gonna
wave
try and rip something off.
you can wave your fist angry at the sky in a ripoff too.
Yeah, it will be like that, but I'm hoping that it'll be more like a rip off and less like a personal like.
Man, I mean, yeah, I think out of the three, right? Anger at God, anger at your father, and a ripoff. The third one is probably the least embarrassing one.
Yeah, I did write a little bit yesterday or the day before. I can't remember now.
Mm.
But it was only about 800 words, and I'd like smashed it out
Oh,
in like an hour, and it sucked. I read
what
it back.
form? What form?
I think I wrote it in the wrong form because I wrote it as this sort of like memoir. I was trying to write it as like a like. It's funny that when I was like reading your update, it said something about like what were the two forms I think that you had
Oh
like
yeah.
presented.
The first form, I don't know why I went with it, was fictional memoir. It was such a stupid idea. I don't know why I stuck to it for so long, but I gave it a decent shot.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I would think I need a new form.
So for me, it was so funny that you sent that because I saw it and I was like, oh, like I think that was my one. I was like, fictional memoir.
You know what kind of people write fictional memoir is when they can't commit to like a fully invented world.
Yeah.
And you're just
And it's so bad. Like
it's kind of like my life, but not really.
Oh
man.
man. Because I think it was like I was trying to write about musicians' memoirs.
Ooh,
And it's so
okay.
funny because like memoirs are usually, personally, I find them really boring. But musicians' memoirs kind of interest me. So I was like, oh, maybe if I write it as a musician who isn't famous, like preempting their memoir.
Wait, maybe we should do a book club episode about this because I have two musicians' memoirs.
Which one?
I have Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
And Anthony Kiedis from Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Why did you? I wanted to do Patti Smith's Just Kids because I know that's really popular.
Yes.
And we're selling out as hard as we can. So, I mean, I'm happy to do it.
I mean,
also, you know, like...
Oh, the fictional memoir. What was your memoir about? Now I want to know.
I was trying to imagine what a musician's memoir would be like. And I should probably read a musician's memoir before I write that. I was thinking about it again. It should be more sparse. It should have way less, like... We'll talk about this in this episode, like anxiety-ridden, like over-explanation of stuff, which is what my natural voice is probably... There's a lot of asides and interludes, and I need to... And I think
those are hard, man.
This is not the story for that sort of, like, neuroticism.
If you don't do it well, those asides will lose your reader so quickly. Okay, so for me... When I was trying to do this whole fictional memoir thing, the template I had in mind was Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. It's a sci-fi novel, anti-war novel based on largely the author's experience fighting in World War II as a very young man. And that novel has a really famous first chapter where that first chapter is not really fiction; it's basically memoir. So I'm like, I'll just base it off that. And I don't think it worked, no.
Yeah, it's really hard to know what works and what doesn't. So.
I know.
Oh, it is what it is. We'll see how we go with our respective things.
Oh.
Right. We've been talking for like 30 minutes about not what the episode's about. So I think we should probably get into
it. Oh, we promised it would be like a short conversation.
All right. So Today's episode will just be because I actually just happened to walk past a John Green novel in the bookstore, and I was like,
Bruh.
you know what we need to do?
I thought you were going to say you walked past John Green himself.
I don't live in like Indiana or wherever it is that he lives, or Cleveland, or
Indiana. But anyways, you were saying you walked past the John Green book. Which one?
yeah. It was a I don't know why it was on display actually. Like the short story collection, Let It Snow.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it was funny because it brought me back because it was the last John Green book I remember reading. So I think I just thought it'd be an interesting thing to talk about because obviously John Green, very popular, probably I guess not so consistently in the public consciousness now. I know that he released a couple of books somewhat recently, but I haven't personally read them.
Yeah, I think John Green's cultural status is probably a good first thing to talk about because I would say when his book The Fault in Our Stars was released, he's probably as famous and successful a modern author could be in this day and age.
Yeah.
And that's
So-
a big deal.
Yeah, 100%. And I think maybe let's just start, like, brief introduction to who John Green is. John Green, young adult fiction writer. He's written some of the most popular young adult books of all time. So most famously, Fault in Our Stars. I don't remember when that was made, but it famous because it became a movie that was a huge hit, particularly in like high school, stuff like that. In my high school, it was really big.
Mm.
But I also know that some of his other famous works people definitely will have read. Looking for Alaska, Paper Towns. I think he's got, I don't know if he's got more than one short story collection, but Let It Snow was the one that I remember for being most popular. He's almost also famous for creating the Crash Course series along with his brother Hank, right? Hank
Yeah.
Green. Basically, I think what happened was in those earlier days of YouTube, they basically gave him a bunch of money to create an original channel. So him and his brother created like this educational Crash Course series where they would do short like YouTube videos explaining different subjects. So I think John Green, he focused on English and history. Hank kind of focused on science and psychology. They were really big at my high school, like, and they were just like fun videos to watch. They would be about whatever the famous kind of book Of Mice and Men or
The
Grapes of
Catcher in the
Wrath.
Rye.
Yeah, Catcher in the Rye, those sorts of videos. I actually think they like play a huge part for his like role in popular culture.
Yes, 100%. Because those videos easily have 10 million views each.
I didn't even know that. Holy
Yeah.
jeez. But yeah, they were a great.
Oh, he's an artsy boy.
They ended up covering heaps of subjects long after I stopped watching them. He's also well known, I think, for being very publicly online.
Yes.
He was like really big on Tumblr. He had like a very close relationship with his fans. As far as I know, not in a creepy way, but these things change all the time.
Yeah, I think that was a great bio. I will probably only add to that the few other things that I'm familiar with. But I think you've definitely covered most. Like one is his really important internet persona, internet presence, and the other is his like literary output, right? So in his internet community, the fan base that he and his brother Hank share, it's called Nerd Fighters. Yeah, that's their actual name, Nerd Fighters. And they also make short videos on their own channel called Vlog Brothers, which is separate from the Crash Course channel. And yeah, I watched a lot of those. And in terms of literature, did you know he also created a podcast?
I'm sure he did.
Two
but
podcasts, actually.
I've never listened to them. Yeah.
Yeah. Two podcasts, actually. One's called Dear Hank and John, where I guess he chit-chats with Hank, but I actually have never listened to that one. But his other podcast is called The Anthropocene Reviewed. And you can look this up on Spotify or Apple or wherever you're listening to this on now, actually. And that podcast is not a chatty one at all. It's actually, each episode is just an essay written by John. And I think he released it monthly. And it was really successful as well. And that was turned into a nonfiction book and published, I think, during lockdown. So that was probably his first nonfiction book. So, oh, and before that, he also wrote a fiction book called Turtles All the Way Down. So, Chad, you might have heard of it. That one's really big too. And most recently, he released another nonfiction book called, he will release, I should say, Everything is Tuberculosis. Because he has a whole like interest in infectious disease and fighting infectious disease. And he like poured a lot of money, philanthropy, and effort into it. And he's writing a new book called Everything is Tuberculosis. And yeah, I think that sums up what I know of him.
Yeah. I know that he's got a religious background. And I think he started out, he studied basically an English major and then also religious studies. And he thought about becoming a chaplain. And I think he started to do it. And then he was like,
yeah.
And he stopped.
I know that story so well because he covered it in detail in one of the episodes of the Anthropocene Reviewed, because those are like very personal essays. Yeah, and the story is he was going to become an Episcopalian priest, but then he dropped out. And he said he told everyone that he dropped out because he didn't want to learn Greek, which is true. But what really happened is that he worked as a student chaplain in a children's hospital, and he witnessed some like really severe suffering and pain, especially on children and their families. And he couldn't cope with some of that. And so he chose not to be going to the clergy.
Yeah. I think in between that and becoming a writer, I think he started out as an essayist, right?
That I don't know.
So he like worked for this. He would write essays and like he would read them on NPR and stuff, I think.
A book reviewer?
Yeah. Well, he was also a book reviewer. With I can't remember what the name of the book list or something. I don't know the name of the.
Yeah,
but he was also a book reviewer.
So I don't remember that either. Yeah, but he was.
Yeah. He's definitely like one of those sort of like literary, like catch him reading in the park sort of vibe.
What?
Like very soft, like soft boy energy. The funny thing to me is that like there is an element of his appeal which aged out, and I guess is no longer present because he like is famously quite like twee. I think he like even from the name Nerd Fighters, like very like kind of nerdy and earnest and sentimental. Yeah. A little. It definitely wasn't cool for a while. Like, we like you enter the Rick and Morty era of like television, and kids' consumption of fiction becomes a bit more jaded and a bit more cynical, and that like sort of earnestness that he's like well known for
is dying out. You think?
It did. I don't know. Maybe it's coming back, but I definitely think that there was a period of time where he kind of lost that steam, and it was mostly, I thought, because kids weren't really resonating with like very earnest stories. But that's like my personal perspective. I don't know that that's true culturally or anything like that.
It's interesting. It's interesting. And also maybe it's just the fact that their massive fan base has grown up with them, right?
Yeah, and I guess that's also possible. I guess I was curious as well. Which of his books have you read? Because I've only read a couple of them. I kind of know him more as like an internet personality or whatever.
That's a great question, and my answer will surprise you.
If you say you've only read one, this episode is so screwed.
Well, that at least it will be short. Jesus. No, I have read 4.
Okay,
technically 4 of his books. So I'll list them. I read The Fault in Our Stars at the height of its popularity. It's actually one of the first English fiction that I read in its entirety.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And I remember being really confused about a few of the sentences in there. And I actually like emailed my American pen pal. I was like, can you explain what this sentence means?
Oh my god, that's so cute.
Yeah. I was in high school. And I remember I did a whole presentation in class about like why people should read this book. And then like everyone was so impressed. Oh my god, memories. Anyway, so that The Fault in Our Stars, like everyone else, I read. And then I read Will Grayson.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I believe that's a book written by John Green in collaboration with someone else.
Yeah, it's like a famous, I think, LGBT
David
author or something. Yeah,
Leviathan.
that's a cool name.
I know, right? And I also read Paper Towns a few years later. And then I technically read the Anthropocene Reviewed book. I think I
But
did
you
read
just
that.
listened to all of them, basically.
No. The published version is actually a little bit different to the podcast version, but I prefer the podcast way, way, way more.
Any
but
reason?
Yes, I'll get into that. But like basically, but I have read the book as well. So that's 4 of his books. But to be honest, like what you said, I also know him, I think, more as an internet personality because I love Crash Course. So my favorite work of his is actually Crash Course, his podcast, The Anthropocene Reviewed, and his videos on Vlogbrothers. You'll notice like none of his fiction.
Calling them works is pretty like strong.
Come on, Crash Course is so high production.
No. I don't know that. Like, especially the Vlogbrothers videos, those are not works. I think.
They're works.
He's kind of just talking to the.
He writes a script.
That's just because he's famously got like anxiety and OCD.
Oh yeah,
I think.
Yeah, OCD. That's a huge part of
his personality and neuroticism.
Yeah. Oh wait, hold on. I've also read Turtles All the Way Down, so 5.
Oh, so you've read a lot then.
Wait, how do you know about this? If you only read,
you can read things online. I woke up at 5 this morning.
Wait,
you think I don't prepare for these?
Are you a Vlogbrothers watcher?
No.
Oh, I was like, wait, how do you know about the student chaplain
I'm like
thing?
watching like interviews and like going through.
Hey, he does prepare for these episodes.
Even though it doesn't sound like I do, I definitely do. Just so that people if people are interested in reading, what should they read?
Okay, so just to give chat some context, we're gonna give a synopsis of all the books that we just mentioned in the case that you are interested in getting into some John Green books. So The Fault in Our Stars tells the story of Hazel Grace Lancaster, a teenage cancer patient who falls in love with Augustus Waters, another young person from her cancer support group. Their relationship explores themes of love, loss, and the search of meaning in the face of terminal illness.
Pretty direct and clear summary. It's actually pretty good. I was hoping for it to be worse.
No, Gemini does a great job. All right, which book are you doing?
Looking for Alaska, because that's the debut novel. All right, in 2 sentences. Looking for Alaska. Miles Holter enrolls at Culver Creek boarding school, seeking the great perhaps, and is immediately drawn to the enigmatic Alaska Young. Their lives intertwine with adventure and self-discovery, but a tragic event changes everything.
I see. I think this is a good point to bring up how a common criticism of John Green's fiction is that his teenagers are pretentious.
It's not like I fully disagree with it. I think his teenagers enjoy art and they're incredibly anxious. And I think that comes off as pretension to a lot of people. My experience with reading like John Green generally was like, oh, like other people also worry about a million things. Because before I'd read John Green, I didn't know that brand of like young adult fiction kind of existed, which was like these slew of like coming of age stories about like anxious kind of loser guys who spent a lot of time just watching things happen.
Well, he did have an incredibly big impact on young adult literature. I mean, even just the way that the Fault in Our Stars cover is designed, like it changed the way young adult fiction covers are designed
Really?
forever. Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious actually. No, but going back to what you said. You said pretentious teenagers are really just care about art and are anxious. That's actually
That's
not.
that's how
I
I
don't think
feel.
that's interesting. That I wouldn't say that's my take.
Oh yeah. How
I
would you
think
say it?
I think my take is that they are just too a bit too unafraid of their own feelings.
Oh, like overly earnest, you mean?
Yeah.
Well,
And
how would
then
that come off as pretentious?
and it's like because they are earnest, right? So they are not afraid to talk about these things with like emotion related language. So in The Fault in Our Stars, there'll be like pain demands to be felt. So you can tell that that's an insight that a really smart but also in pain teenager would think, right? They will be like, I'm feeling this and I would like to figure out why I'm feeling this or what insight I can draw from this. And they'll be like, pain demands to be felt. Whereas I think a lot of real teenagers might not be as so in touch of their feelings with their feelings.
Mm,
They might just like feel the same pain and also I'm sure are smart enough to dig into it, but they would just habitually brush it aside. And even if they understand pain demands to be felt, they wouldn't be compelled to say it out loud.
yeah. But I think this is one of those cases where it's weird that that's a criticism for me. I think what you want as a reader is to have feelings, have the author understand feelings that you have, and then give voice to it. So, like, it
Exactly.
seems weird to be like, these teenagers aren't real. It's like if they were totally real and you could only see what there was on the outside,
Like
then why
would you
would
read the
like you
book?
wouldn't read the book? Like,
Exactly.
you shouldn't read at
Yeah,
all. Stick
exactly.
to sports.
I also think it is weird that it's a criticism because like he's giving voice to what these languages sorry, he's giving the vocabulary and the language to for teenagers to talk about what they're feeling. And I think that's why he's also really popular. Yeah, like sometimes people just dislike honesty because it takes courage to be honest.
That being said, I mean, I think it is for a very specific group of people, and I think people
Mm,
that didn't have a voice before in fiction, maybe. But
mm.
since then, like this is the dominant voice, and so it's kind of become annoying. I think over time.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, I was also going to ask you specifically if I go, okay, write me a John Green book. What are the essential elements of a John Green book that you need?
That's a great question. I assume you mean fiction?
Yeah, fiction.
And I have actually never thought about that because his fiction is not
Top of
his
mind for
top
you.
work for me. But to answer that question, yeah, a teenager who is very smart and very in touch with their feelings. And there's not a whole lot of exciting plot happening. It's more, yeah, literally teenagers exploring their feelings. I think that's the John Green fiction book for me, based on the things that I've read.
Oh, okay. I kind of think of it another way because for me, like everything is genre, right? So I was trying to think like, what is the John Green trope? And to me, the John Green character, main character, is always a detective character. It is like,
What are you
let me explain it. Let me explain it.
talking? There's so much to explain. Blaze ahead. Go on.
So the whole thing about the John Green character to me is like, it's always a guy who is kind of an outsider. Even if
What
they're
if
like,
it's a
they have
girl?
friends, or a girl who's an outsider. It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
Either way, it's an outsider character.
Outsider, yep.
Observing things.
True so far. Yep.
That's usually how you start a detective story, right? The detective has to be looking for an answer. So the structure of Looking for Alaska, right, is it's basically about a guy who's trying to find out what happened. Maybe not partly literally. So did you say you'd read Looking for Alaska? I can't remember.
I actually think I have read it, but it made very little impression on me. I don't remember it.
And to me, like, and I'm the same way. I'm definitely not like a big John Green fan or anything like that. But if I think about what I do remember, there's this investigative quality, and what you were saying earlier about teenagers exploring their feelings. In a lot of it, because it's a lot of coming of age, they're finding like a truth that's literal and also like a truth, that's like metaphorical usually, where they're trying to find. So usually if a character's trying to find something and they're an outsider and they're trying to look for information, which is usually the way that a John Green story goes. Like I'm pretty sure there's a scene where like the character's like smoking a cigarette or something, right? Or like refuses to light this cigarette.
Oh my God. I've literally never heard this, Derek. I've literally never.
I don't know that it's true, but that's the way my brain works.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting.
And the Looking for Alaska thing definitely is like very like detective-y. Much more than I think Fault in Our Stars. But
no, I think The Fault in Our Stars fits the formula that you just described too.
It does, but I mean, Looking for Alaska is even like they're literally like trying to find out what happened.
And also, The Turtles All the Way Down is also literally finding out what happened. There's a disappearance.
They all are like that. It's like an 80s style like story with teenagers, but then if the teenagers was also like in their heads detectives. That's kind of like almost how a John Green novel works.
That is
which
so
I really like
interesting.
As a trope.
You have convinced me. I think you're right. I mean, yeah, like you have your own writing style, and you got to make fiction, like, create a plot somehow, right? Like, that's a good way to do it, really.
I think you mentioned before, you're much less interested in his fiction. You like him as like an internet personality or his other works. What is it about the other works in particular that you enjoy so much?
Great question. Oh man, like his other work, so specifically I mean the Anthropocene Reviewed podcast, and especially his crash course on world history and literature. Oh man, those have shaped me so much as a person and as a writer that I literally don't know who I would be without them. Seriously, I went to high school in China, and obviously the world history taught there, we did learn about world history, is very different to the way that it's taught by John Green, and I assume in the Western world at large. Not just the way it's taught, like the way to approach it is different. Like we would rarely write essays for history. We would only do like multiple choice questions and short answer, like memorization type tasks. And also like the literal facts sometimes will be different. I'll give you an example, although this is more philosophy than history, but it's a very obvious example where in Chinese high schools, they teach Marxist philosophy. I mean, of course they do, right?
Yeah.
And the first thing they teach you is the difference between materialism and idealism. What's the opposite of materialism? In Chinese, it's 唯物主义 and 唯心主义. In China, the way they teach things, the first philosophy 101, there is materialism and idealism is wrong. That's the first lesson they teach you. Like, they tell you idealism means when an apple exists and you point at an apple and you say, I believe the apple doesn't exist. And believing that you thinking the apple doesn't exist, the apple will actually not exist. And they're like, okay, so that's why idealism is wrong. Materialism means sticking to the fact and sticking to, practical experience to guide decisions, as opposed to relying on faith and your subjective view of the world. And the first thing they teach you is that not to compare critically one with the other. They just teach you one is wrong.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Then now, like, I don't think even the most hardcore CCP supporter is gonna disagree with me on that one. But that is how they teach philosophy in China.
Right.
And yeah, so in John Green's Crash Course World History series, he always, I think, presents a very accessible but also critical way to teach history, which I loved. And honestly, without his literature crash courses, I would not want to become a writer at all.
Wow.
It just wasn't possible because I didn't realize that I was able to access even English literature on that critical level. And I think many people assume if you're not a native speaker, the language as art literature side will just be completely off limits to you. But then watching his literature series somehow convinced me that like that side is what you need to learn to understand anyway, even if you are a native speaker. So it doesn't matter as long as you put in the effort to learn. Anyone can um, explore literature in that way. And yeah, it's just like in the way he writes the lessons, and he makes critical thinking so accessible.
I think that's definitely something that I think it's true across all of his work generally, right? He makes everything accessible. His young adult fiction is kind of like kid size, like meal sized, like literary fiction almost, right?
Yeah.
The kind of stuff that you would see. He's kind of the champion of like popular writing in that way.
Yeah, and I so deeply appreciated that. And yeah, many people have complimented his way to turn a phrase, like just convey very insightful and intricate ideas in very accessible language. And I have literal phrases of his stuck in my head that I
Really?
refer to all the time.
Like?
I'll give examples, but then I remember feeling like when I was watching them, mostly during uni, that I felt my mind literally expanding because it was like how critical thinking is only possible when you have the language for it. Like, language and thought is connected in that way, and then he gave me the literal language tools to think critically. Like, for example, this sentence from I think his world history episode on China. He said he was talking about how Chinese history is always has a complicated relationship between the kings and emperors and the scholars who record history. And he was like, the complicated circularity of Chinese history mirrors the complicated circularity between those who write it and those who make it.
He does have all these like very particular turns of phrase. They always shorten what the alternative version of the sentence would be, and they compress it. So there's a real I think skill to like creating dense writing.
And yeah, he knows all the techniques too. Like that sentence he said at the very end of the episode, as in like the final gut punch before the episode ends. He always does that, and I love it. And I've totally tried to copy it in my writing too. I'm like, hit them at the end of the paragraph.
I guess it's also a very like, I think, essayist way of writing.
Yeah. I think he's a better essayist. I think he's a much better essayist than he is a novelist.
I don't have much exposure to his like actual essays. I mean, I kind of know what his writing style is from the episodes of like Crash Course that I've seen, or how he talks generally.
Man, I'm so familiar with his voice. Like I'm sure if someone gives me a clip of 1 millisecond of him saying something, I'll recognize that strongly because I've watched so much of his content.
The relationship between like, I think, being an immigrant, being interested in like art and literature, and then wanting an into sort of like Western literature, the European novel legacy. I think he provides a really great in for it. That's really interesting. I never thought of it that way, but the accessibility thing, I'd always thought about it in terms of for kids or
story.
But in terms of like across language, because simplification means that you can.
And
that's really good.
In simplification in a way that the nuance is not lost.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the whole like circularity between those who write it and those who make it. Like that's just a brilliant turn of phrase. I can tell you, like Crash Course has a huge worldwide audience, and I think his brother Hank once mentioned in one of their videos that Crash Course aims to reach anyone with a strong grasp of the English language. It doesn't matter where they are and stuff. There was one episode, again, on his Crash Course history on China, where he's like, this is the current state of China, where no one can watch this video because government bans YouTube. And the comments are just flooded with, I'm watching from Shanghai because of VPN.
That's so good.
So, yeah, it definitely had an enormous cultural impact.
That's fascinating.
Oh my God, can I give a few more phrases?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah. What was it? Yeah. Just such a simple sentence that just literally changed my worldview. Where in an episode on Chinese history again, he said, China's two revolutions in the 20th century, the KMT one and the communist one, China's two revolutions in the 20th century has made a lot of great and terrible things possible for China. I mean, I know it sounds like such an ordinary sentence, but to me at the time it was completely revelatory because it's such a calm and unbiased and objective view of China's revolutions. Whereas coming from my world, I had always seen it as like you either ardently support the second one or you ardently disagree with it. And I had not find that objectivity anywhere else except in John Green's one sentence where it's like, yeah, like be calm and just recognize that those two things has made a lot of great and terrible things possible for China. And you can see how that's like jumping above to a more objective perspective.
Yeah. I guess that there's that skill in combining, literally what the word great and terrible, like words great and terrible mean, with what is actually a somewhat common turn of phrase, but using it in a context where it has maximum impact or maximum value.
Maximum impact.
That's really the skill, right? Like getting something, it would be like using a trope perfectly. I think
that's so good. And does he do it in his fiction? Arguable.
Those books are the fiction that he writes is just generally quite warm and it's quite accepting. I'm sure people might not like his fiction, but they like him as a person. They find his takes, his views interesting. Milan Kundera is almost like sounds like the opposite from those reviews that we were reading, right?
John Green's voice is more down to earth. And Milan Kundera sounds like an arrogant dickhead most of the time. Okay, let's go back to what you said, having an in. That's perfect. That is exactly John Green's role. Just now, you said it. You're like, as an immigrant, having an in to English literature through John Green. That is literally his role to me. I always tell people everything I know about the world, the Western perspective, is through Crash Course World History. Like before it, I didn't know what medieval times. I didn't know Renaissance was considered the beginning of the modern age. I didn't know anything. Yeah, and then of course his literature series is massive. Like I love The Catcher in the Rye so much, at least half because of John Green, because of his, I think, brilliant analysis of it. And this is again another phrase that has just completely stayed in my mind, which is, he says, The Catcher in the Rye is interpreted as a novel about clinging to innocence. And I was like, wow. I didn't know that was something that could be done. But it totally
clinging to innocence?
Yeah, no. You know how when you didn't have the language for it, you don't know that's something that can exist.
I got you. Yeah. But,
yeah.
Is there no equivalent? And this is maybe just me being ignorant, but is there no equivalent of that in like Chinese culture? Like,
I think that's just a J.D. Salinger a J.D. Salinger.
People have been young before, I feel.
No, see, in China, kids, I think in China, innocence is also kind of revered and put on a pedestal by adults.
Oh, but they don't question that.
No, I've never read anything about like clinging to innocence. Exactly like what John Green said.
Yeah.
And that's not just lacking in China. I think even before The Catcher in the Rye, in Western literary canon, that's not exactly a mainstream idea either, right?
I mean,
before The Catcher in the Rye.
I'm not sure, but you might be right.
Mm.
And you can really, but you can also really tell how much he likes J.D. Salinger as well.
Yeah,
in his fiction, like it's
in his totally.
His books are kind of like Catcher in the Rye ripoffs.
Ripoffs, except like softer.
Except except not angry is kind of the thing. Sad instead of angry.
Well, he didn't go to war.
Yeah, that's the difference.
Oh my god. Okay, here's another kicker. Reading is not symbol hunting because the point of a metaphor or symbol is to bring the distant close.
Oh, that's really funny.
Because when he's like opening his literature series, he's like, I know y'all are annoyed by English teacher going, the blue curtain means this, the red carpet means that. But then he's like, I don't think the point of reading is to go symbol hunting and decode these objects in a way. It's about, bringing things that are hard to talk about, that are far away from you, close to you.
I agree with that. I think that's really good. Because that was always like my big gripe in like high school about the way they teach like literature. I don't exactly know how it's taught in China, but at least here there is, because there's a curriculum, because there's this and that, there is an exercise of symbol hunting, quote hunting. You're like looking for discrete pieces of evidence that you can memorize and then regurgitate. And often people don't stop to think about what the whole book is. And what's it like in China? How do they teach literature in China? Or is it like all got a political bent to it? Or like,
no.
Or is it just very black and white?
No, I don't think either are true. They do give you like texts, like both classical and modern Chinese texts, and you read them and you're like, here's a sentence structure or grammatical structure that they use. Here's a metaphor, here's a simile. But there's also a huge emphasis on like memorization. Like you memorize what's the second line of this poem, and you're expected to reproduce that in an exam. And as far as I know, we've never been instructed to read an entire book for Chinese. Can you imagine?
What?
Yeah, never, not even once.
I wonder why that is.
I don't know, and I think it's incredibly damaging. We should be doing that.
Because it's like literally training you to take things out of context. Like,
I mean, we have like read like in our textbook. There's essays, right? Essays that Chinese writers
famous like excerpts and stuff, but they just take
excerpts
like,
and sometimes an entire essay, like that for a few pages, or a short story, but never an entire fiction book. And I have literally never written an analytical essay on a book.
What?
You are expected to write essays, but that's like they give you a topic and then you discuss that. You never write about a book.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. So then how did you learn about how people study like literature here? I say here, but I mean...
Actually, no. I actually still don't know how high school English here really works.
Okay.
You've told me that you read book, like an entire book, and discuss that. I'm like, okay. And some other people have told me they read 1984 and had a classroom discussion on it. So that's the extent I know. I know very little.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Do you see how I think that's so damaging? I mean, like, I know even if you make kids read books, there are still kids that are just like get very little out of it.
Look, to be fair, a lot of my like school, like a lot of people didn't bother reading books. They just got on Spark Notes or whatever.
Yeah, but in China, like they don't even make it.
you can just opt out of like reading a book. Like you don't even have to carry it home. Like that's like, are they trying to save money on paper? Like what? I don't understand. What? Why?
Yeah,
I don't know. That's definitely the most surprising thing I've ever found out about life in China. Now that I know,
it's crazy. We have a school library, but that's very much like you can go there if you like reading, I guess. None of our schoolwork required us to go to the library.
I've been saying China specifically because of the example that you gave, but I wonder if that's just common in Asia, actually.
Good question. I'm curious to know. I have no idea, actually.
Yeah, so if anyone knows, comment, I guess, because I would like to know. It's just an interesting way the way that people teach literature.
Yeah, and maybe I should be clear. It's not like Kids in China didn't read books. We
No,
definitely
obviously,
did
no.
books. Yeah,
But
yeah.
in terms of part of the curriculum,
No.
yeah. And hey, look, there are plenty of people in Australia that would be like,
Yeah.
I'd rather not read a
Yeah,
whole book.
exactly.
So that would be perfect for me.
Exactly.
Um,
Man, one other thing from John Green, like, is that he also gave like general life advice to young people because his YouTube channel has such a young audience, at least from like earlier years. He doesn't think life is about maximizing income. He's like, he thinks human life is about relationship and community. And he's like, you try to make friends and make cool stuff with them. And I'm like, oh, and I would watch that episode where he said that again and again to like find confidence in like the life
So
choices
cute.
that I was making. Yeah, it was.
I mean,
great.
that's great advice. He is very rich. just so that people.
Yeah, okay, so maybe let's disregard what he said about life is not about. I mean, it's not about, but it certainly doesn't hurt if you maximize your lifetime income. But it's also about relationship and community.
He does give a lot of his money away, so he obviously has to maximize his money somehow so that he can give it away.
His philanthropy, I would love to talk about that. It'll be quick, but I just love his stance on absolutely refusing to accept poverty and preventable disease and human suffering. Like, that gives me so much hope, and I think whatever hope I have would be inspired by his writing, probably. No, it's just not the hope I have for him, but like the hope he has for the world. I'm inspired by that. It's like he's like, suffering is not mandatory, or like, and he's like, he does it in a way that he recognizes. He doesn't minimize it. He knows about the pain and suffering. He has done like interviews with refugees in the United States, and he's giving a lot of money to like a charity based in Sierra Leone. And I just love that he's like, I know despair. I have felt it many times, but I don't think despair is productive. And I want there to be hope so that I can be productive because there is real work to be done.
I actually, it's funny that you mention it because you can kind of see like how his views come from his like life. Because I read something about how he is, I was gonna say famously, but he is well known to be on like anxiety medication. And I think there was one point, I can't remember before which novel he released, but he stopped taking them because he was like, I don't feel creative. I want to like, feel creative and get productive. And it caused like a mental health like absolute breakdown. That totally like screwed up a lot of his life. And where he talks about like he didn't eat for ages and he was just drinking like 2-liter bottles of Sprite. And I was like, oh my God, this guy, I guess you do know what despair looks like. No.
Yeah, from his anxiety and from, going through death of friends, he wrote about that in the Anthropocene Reviewed. And having that student chaplain experience where, see, this is another great quote. He was like, when he was a student chaplain at a children's hospital, his supervisor was like, children have always died. It's natural. Working here, you're going to see that. And he's like, that might be true. They have always died, but I can't accept that. I can't accept it then sitting in the windowless hospital, and I cannot accept it now as a father myself. See, like that's the kind of... It's great writing, isn't it?
It is good. I mean, I can't say that. I think the way you can really see it in his. I feel like you can see it a lot in his fiction. Like whenever like he's suffering and like things that he suffered. You know how it's funny that we mentioned the memoir format, and like when you don't have you can't fully commit to world building, and you're like, this is kind of my life, but not really. Like that's kind of what his fiction is like, right? Like Looking for Alaska, also about the death of a friend. Oh, I wonder what inspired that. Like, like, Fault in Our Stars. It's about people dying in a hospital. Oh, I wonder what that's about.
Dying of hospital.
Children dying in a hospital. Wonder what that's about.
Mm-mm.
And
That's
then
totally fine. That's totally fine.
and it's kind of very much like, well, wouldn't it be cool if like something else happened instead of what actually happened in like real life? Yeah. So I mean, it's good. Like you need positivity, right, in the world. I think
Yeah.
we are coming back around to that. I think the
Mm.
jaded era is a bit over. I think people are
Jaded.
kind of sick of.
Yeah, I love how you bring up Rick and Morty. That's actually great. Isn't it crazy how I love John Green and Rick and Morty at the same time? See, she contains multitude.
She contains multitudes.
Oh man, and oh my, like one thing that he in the Anthropocene Reviewed, there is an episode. Oh, I don't remember the title, but the quote is how, you know, suddenly he would just get the chill in the air, quote unquote, which is basically that depressive feeling that everything's meaningless. And then he was like, I spiral from that. And then he's like, you know, and if I cannot be happy, I will be jaded. Because if I cannot be happy, at least I want to be cool.
I feel that so strongly. That's so legit, dude.
But you should read that essay because then he subverts it.
Yeah, maybe send it to me. Maybe I need to read it.
Then he subverts it. He's like, no, jadedness, cynicism, like it doesn't get me very far. Like he's like, I want to feel everything while I'm here.
So I go through that loop, actually, the exact loop that's been described. I feel like maybe I should get back on the meds.
To help Derek and also probably all members of the chat, the episode in question is called Air Conditioning and Sycamore Trees.
I love that. That's such a good title.
Yeah, of the Anthropocene Reviewed podcast. So yeah.
Is it long?
No, I think the episodes are about 30 minutes. And yeah, he has this really crazy premise of he reviews things on a 5-star scale, like completely crazy things. Like, so when he reviews sycamore trees, he talks about his spirals. And by the way, the chill is in the air. That's not John Green. That's John Green quoting Edna Vincent Millay, who is an American poet. And that's another thing. John Green is great at quoting other people. He always finds
very literary.
Yeah. He always finds exactly the right quote to illustrate his point. Yeah, and I think I've said all that I want to say about John Green too. If he ever listens to this, thank you, really, is all I have to say. I think now's a good point to wrap up today's episode. If you'd like to support Licensed Poetics, please head to buymeacoffee.com/licensedpoetics. Thank you so much again for listening. I'm your host, Fang Ling.
And I'm Derek Dow, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye!